You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 191, Rosetta, hosted by Dan Terry,
Hashtag Zaogate,
Bryan Patton of As the Story Grows,
Billy Forever,
and Joseph Wren. It's Discuss Metal Dan. I'm bringing you smooth jazz this evening.
and then you play Dillinger.
Dillinger Escape Plan.
The
starts
smoothest
playing.
jazz I can think of.
Presented by discussmetal.com. And if you think bad things happen in Philadelphia, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe. That is Dan. Bryan Patton is back to talk about Rosetta.
Yeah, let's get crushed.
Yeah, I also enjoyed drifting off to sleep while flying through outer space. And this band pretty much accomplishes that for me. Every now and again, though, they wake my ass up, which is kind of exciting all at the same time. I love space metal, guys, and Rosetta is kind of one of the ultimate embodiments of that.
You're pretty much a fan of all things space. Space metal, space rock, actual outer space.
Well, I've never been to actual outer space, but I've heard it's nice.
You'll get there someday, dude. It's
but
fine.
incredibly emotional and depressing all at the same time. So I think outer space is kind of where it's at, and Rosetta is absolutely one of my favorite bands in this style. And I don't really even know what to call this style. I mean, is it post metal or is it like, I don't know, like ambient metal? There's still some metal in there, but I don't know. It's mostly ambient, especially off their first record, which I believe came out on 2 discs. And basically half of it was noise and the other half of it was like Rosetta songs.
Well, because you're listening to it wrong.
I know I'm supposed to listen to them at the same time.
Yeah.
How does that fucking work? I'm supposed to get 2 CD players, 4 sets of speakers, make sure I hit play at the perfect time.
They're doing that same bullshit that Neurosis does, where you have to sequence 2 records at the exact same time. And that, I have listened to it both ways. People on YouTube are really nice where they sync them up the same way for you, or sync them up for you, and you can kind of hear the full product, but then you have to listen to whatever shitty encoder that YouTube used, so you don't really get the full effect. So the idea is that you would have 2 turntables and both LPs and put them down, and I guess I'm thinking for perfect stereo, you do your right speaker hooked up to one turntable, then your left speaker hooked up to the other ones, and then you just sit there in the middle.
I strongly disagree. It's 2020. We all have digital audio recorders because we're all on podcasts. So you just take your MP3s, line them up, render them down, compress to hell, and go to town.
I see. Well, that would work too. I was just going for the uber hipster way of doing it. Which actually, if we were going to go that route, we would actually just get like the original reel-to-reel tape and just. Of course, I don't know how many of the records are on reel-to-reel tape. Well, that conversation's going nowhere. Something interesting that happened to me this week, and by this week I mean like earlier today.
We're going to talk about this now?
Oh yeah. So I got my Zao Where Blood and Fire Bring Rest. Holy fucking shit edition reissue.
How's that fucking artwork, by the way?
Oh, the artwork is fantastic. Everything about this vinyl re-release is fantastic except for one thing. And that is you get to the song March, so 4th song on the album, and you get about, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds into the intro, and then this happens.
You think this is how they came up with the remix idea? We'll just loop a section and that'll be a beat?
Well, it's an endless loop. It's a locked groove, meaning that your stylus is never going to pass off of that groove and go into the rest of the record unless you actually get up and take the needle and move it over a little bit. So you're gonna lose a little bit of audio there. And the thing that sucks is that it appears to be that the majority of the records that went out have this defect. So we're now entering with all the drama that was associated with how quickly this sold out and how important it was and how everybody was super stoked. This has now turned into its own new problem that we are affectionately referring to as Zaogate. It is rough. Now, I have not gotten my Splinter Shards record yet, but I can only hope that one is actually really good. And, we'll see how it goes. But, yeah, so if any of you guys have Where Blood and Fire Bring Rest and you're trying to currently flip it on eBay, I would really hate to be you right now. And if you're also having this problem, take a little video or a picture or something, throw it up on your Facebook page with hashtag Zaogate. Let's see how many hits we can get on Zaogate.
On the plus side, dude, you got what you've always wanted, a never-ending Zao song.
I mean, I think the best comment that I saw on that so far was in the Zao metalcore group, where a guy was all like, "Oh man, can you imagine? Once this song finally hits, the anticipation that must have built up for you, because it's like right there. Because the intro to March, it's like so intense. It's nothing but like a straight build.
It's and two notes. They play them a lot. And
now it's literally an eternal build-up. It's eternal hype. It's such a clean loop that it actually sounds kind of cool. And it's to the point where, like, if I was a baseball player, that would be like my walkout music. Like, for sure.
Well, before Dan goes on about tension that never resolves, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, then you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. So if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening. And now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
I mean, what do you want me to say about 5-star reviews? Leave them for us. We like them. They make me feel good, for the most part. But yeah, overall, keep leaving us reviews on your podcasting apps. Leave us some comments. Follow us on Facebook. You look at all of our cool stuff, and we'll read all the cool stuff that you say on the show. Take a drink every time I say the word cool.
Hashtag Zaogate.
Cool.
Hey, Bryan, what's going on As the Story Grows?
I've ripped off this podcast for the Patreon page, and that's a lot of fun. So, yeah, thank you guys.
For a little bit more on that, Bryan is doing he has a Patreon podcast called After Dark, where he is sitting there and talking about the discographies of his favorite bands, or maybe some bands that are not his favorite bands. But he gets to do it, in the privacy of his own home without assholes like me and Joe interrupting him every 3 seconds and being like, "Yeah, I disagree with that." But it's really cool. It's a pretty low asking price to help Bryan pay some of those podcast bills that are very real and very annoying to have to pay every month. So throw dude some support, throw him some money down. What is it, like $3? It's not very much. And you can
you get the podcast for $1.
Oh, $1. Okay. Well, then yeah. I'm overachieving then.
Right in.
So after you subscribe to Discuss Metal for $1, go give Bryan another $1.
I mean, for $2, yeah, you could have a lot of extra content that all your friends don't have. So definitely check out those After Dark episodes. I highly recommend the Hopes Fall one and the recent Under Oath one that just came out. That one was a lot of fun. Just hearing somebody else talk about Under Oath and be totally wrong on things. It must be how people feel when they listen to our podcast.
I was definitely not wrong on Under Oath.
I don't know, man. You were definitely right.
Clouds a lot of judgment.
It does. It absolutely does. We got a comment over on YouTube from Dominic on episode 158 NF, where he just says real music, which I would agree with. That is, in fact, the NF tagline.
Thanks, dude.
On Parkway, right? On episode 186 Parkway Drive, Satanic Puppy Overlord says, just bought Horizons a month ago and Deep Blue today. What timing? It was really good timing. I'm trying to remember who I was talking to that was all like, I really wish you guys would do Parkway Drive. And then like literally 2 days later, the Parkway Drive episode drops. And it's like, yeah, I promise we're not inside your house just waiting for you to think of a band for us to talk about. But I realize in that case that it might appear so.
We got a message a few weeks ago from Dagor. He suggested we talk about Rosetta, space metal, and just all-around awesomeness. Today is your day. So Dan, tell me about Rosetta.
Well, Rosetta is an American post-metal band from, you guessed it, if you've been reading between the lines, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And they are it's weird. So the genres that they're typically associated with are post-hardcore, shoegazing, drone, post-rock, avant-garde, and ambient. And I think that largely those are pretty good genre tags, considering I feel like they kind of incorporate a lot of the, like kind of all of those elements at some point. I haven't heard a lot of drone, but I can imagine that it's probably not too far off base here.
For those that do not know, who wants to explain shoegazing? Bryan, I'm looking at you.
Lots of reverb, lots of feedback. Just drench your guitars in reverb. The term comes from just staring down at your pedal board and turning up that reverb. Let's go.
So like lots of Starflyer, early Starflyer.
My Bloody Valentine, Slow Dive.
Yeah.
And turning the knobs on the delay pedal so that you get that spacey sound, that whip whip sound.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. And it's funny because the first time I ever heard music like that, I didn't even think that it was a guitar. I probably would have described it really dumb as it's like electronics, but like more organic, man. Like something like that. It's very, very ethereal, I guess, in a way. And whenever you're like 16 and you're listening to it, it's like, it makes you feel like super important and like you know things that other people don't know. But yeah. So whenever I first got into Rosetta, it was actually my friend Buddy who basically, he showed me a whole bunch of videos. And it actually wasn't a great first impression because he was showing me YouTube videos of the band playing live. But like Rosetta is not like what you would consider to be like a huge band, meaning that like if you're watching live videos of Rosetta, you can't hear anything because they're taking on like shitty Nokia phones, from like the mid 2000s. And so like I saw a dude on stage screaming his lungs out, but you couldn't hear any of the vocals, and you could kind of sort of hear some reverby guitars going on, but like, so I was like, what is the point of this band? I can't hear any of the music. And this was before Spotify or anything. So it was actually several years before I actually got to hear Rosetta in their actual form. And I think the first record that I heard by them was a Determinism of Morality, and have been a pretty big fan ever since. What about you, Bryan? When did you first hear Rosetta?
I got into Rosetta late. The first record I listened to them was the Dead Enders Reunion, their kind of remix B-side rarity record that they put out in 2016. And I stumbled across that on Bandcamp accidentally and loved it and went back and downloaded everything in their discography and became a huge fan.
Nice.
I'm confident Dan put one of these records on in the past, but I really haven't actively listened to Rosetta. I'm aware of their existence, but this band came around when the transition was from nu metal to metalcore. So definitely was not my focus in the early to mid 2000s. And up until this week, I hadn't listened to all of the records. Thankfully, I have a new band that I like listening to, and they're definitely going to be on the shelf as soon as I can buy copies of these albums.
Now, did you listen to the albums and did you listen to the albums or did you listen to the albums and the EPs? Because honestly, I had a lot of trouble this week figuring out what was an album and what was an EP. Because they're all kind of roughly like these guys, an EP for them is like what, 40 minutes, 45 minutes, which is longer than a lot of bands that I like entire albums. So, I mean, it was a little rough. So we're going to kind of go a little bit into the EPs. And I don't think that, and I know before you guys get worried, this is going to be like a 3-hour episode. It's definitely not, because it's not even that there's a lot to say necessarily about each one. But I do feel like it's important to mention some of these because it kind of explains a little bit of the downtime between records in a way. And I feel like this is the kind of band that just has releases, and it's kind of really hard to separate them out as EPs or albums versus like a regular band that might put out a 10-song album and then put out a 5-song EP. Rosetta, there's almost just no real rhyme or reason to it, and so like I think that's really interesting. But I guess let's jump in, shall we? This is what people are here for, right? Everybody skipped to minute 17 of the podcast just to get to hear us talk about the records.
Well, the answer to your question is I listened to the records first because we have a podcast to record. But after that, I threw the band on shuffle and just played whatever came to me. And some of that was the EPs. I think it's all good. There's just a lot of it for one person that hasn't listened to a lot of it to consume. So overall opinion, pending further investigation. Let's put it that way. 2005, the Galilean Satellites.
Sorry, I'm still just reeling from the concept of listening to Rosetta on shuffle.
It goes on forever.
Oh, yeah, I mean, probably.
Like your Zao album.
The Galilean Satellites is this is one of those records that, like, you know, normally I would say, like, oh, you can tell this is the band's first record because da 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 da. These guys come right out of the gate being essentially masters of their craft, in that, like, the songs are drenched with atmosphere. They're drenched with just these really, really, really dense melodic kind of I don't want to say interludes, but I also don't want to sound pretentious enough to say soundscapes. But I would say that they definitely create a mood, and as they go, they kind of just build up to these more chaotic, hardcore-y parts with lots of screaming and lots of just intense, like, chaos. So, like, you could cut the more hardcore parts out of these songs and probably create a totally different sounding record out of them. And I think that's kind of the Rosetta formula, if there's a formula.
I mean, the thing you say about this record is the band comes right out on their debut swinging. It's a 2-disc record. You have the album, and then there's an ambient companion record, and they're meant to be synced together. So, you know, back in 2005, yeah, you're probably looking at a CD player, and you have to have 2 CD players, and you got to put the disc in and hit play at the same time and enjoy the experience that way, which sucks. It's a complete pain in the ass. Who wants to do that? But we're here in 2020. You know, I host a podcast. I just did everything in my editing software, lined it up, and that's just how I listen to this record, as a combined overlay with the ambient on top of the regular songs. And it just creates this extra layer of atmosphere, this extra hugeness to the sound. And it's like, what does Rosetta need to sound bigger, to sound more epic? And that's what they do on this record, is like, we're going to give you an extra disc to take this record to the next level. Like, that's one hell of a debut.
Absolutely. Like, they didn't really build up to this. I mean, like, I'm sure they had like a demo before this or something, but like there was no build up of, like, because I feel like with a lot of bands that ultimately end up sounding like this, you know, maybe they started as a hardcore band and then eventually started kind of experimenting with new styles and then ended up here. And Rosetta's kind of interesting in that they just kind of started here. Like, this was kind of their launch point, no pun intended. But like, it's so hard for me to describe this kind of music because it is very emotional. And honestly, like, this is a band that I really don't pay attention to the lyrics of at all, because I just, I'm kind of just caught up in the way that it makes me feel, and it's very selfish that way. But these records definitely are like equal parts chill and intense. And I think
you're not supposed.
Go ahead.
No, you're not supposed to pay attention to the lyrics. I mean, in the CD, there's no lyrics in the liner notes. It just says these songs are about a spaceman.
Right, and they sound like it. You know, 100%. There are fan attempts to translate the lyrics out and write them out, but yeah, I just couldn't be bothered with any of that shit. You know, like, it was just too much.
I'm not a fan of any record that is released and intended to be combined to be fully experienced. I'm going to have to call bullshit on that and say, if the record's supposed to be big, then why did you cut it in half and release it on 2 separate discs? I'm having flashbacks to 10,000 Days, and we didn't really cover this on the show, but there are songs on 10,000 Days that were very clearly one song and then cut into pieces for the purpose of making the record longer. So to me, that kind of seems like bullshit. I get it. You want me to play 2 sides of the record at the same time, and then I get the full experience. So why not just release the record that way?
For interaction.
I mean, they were originally supposed to just be ambient pieces, segues between songs, but they ended up having enough material, and the label said, "Yeah, let's do the second disc." Which is funny, because when you get to the next record, Wake Lift, they release an ambient companion that literally is supposed to make the record sound like shit when you try to play them together.
Yeah, it's almost like a fuck you in a certain sense. But I think that, like, this record is so successful, and I do think that it's a travesty that if you stream this record on your streaming service or whatever, it's going to show up as like a 2.5 hour or like a 2 hour and 15-minute album. And I would feel really, really bad for anybody that suffered through like that entire length of time, when you really, what you should have had was just like an hour long, you know, maybe an hour and 15-minute long album. But I think that overall this is a great debut, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It establishes everything that you're going to get from Rosetta right away. And honestly, I have trouble figuring out why this band isn't more popular, in the sense that I feel like guitar nerds and like shoegaze fans would absolutely like these should have been like the darlings of those types of groups. But for whatever reason, I feel like Rosetta has stayed relatively obscure throughout their career.
2007, Wake Lift. But not at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely not. This record's interesting because I feel like in a lot of ways it's very, very... they haven't really changed their sound up a lot on this one. That doesn't mean that I don't like it or that I think that it's like less than in any way. I feel like this one's a little bit more intense, and kind of takes their sound a little bit further. But I don't feel like I don't know, like I can't say all the usual shit that I say about these bands, like, oh, they pushed their sound further on this record, or they progressed, or they did this. They were so fucking good from the beginning that this record is literally just more good. So like whenever I say more of that, I don't mean that like they suck or that they're not creative or whatever. Their sound has the experimentation and the creativity baked into it from the beginning. So it's not really a discredit to the band that they're playing a very similar style to their first record. If you loved that first record, getting a record like Wake Lift is what you want.
Is some of the appeal the anti-pop mentality, or is it left over from like the Grateful Dead and Fish, the bands that would play for hours and just jam on what is essentially a root concept?
That's a good question. I don't know if it's either of those.
And don't get me wrong, this band is way more intense than anybody I just said.
Sure.
But the concept of the listener and why I like this, it truly is an album. But then when you see them live, they're not playing this note for note. There's no way they can. Some of this has improvisation built into it. I know that's the appeal with the Mars Volta, but at the same time, the records are fucking great, and they can meander on for way too long, especially in the later part of the discography.
Yeah, I mean, the band does a fantastic job combining the ambient, combining the metal, like in stretching it out. Yeah, like you said, Dan, if you like the first record, you're gonna like this record.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say the same thing a lot tonight.
Right, like the only thing with Rosetta is like a record can be so good, and you're just like, as a standalone piece, this record is amazing. But I listened to the last record, and it was so good that this one doesn't capture you the same way. I think there's a lot of that with this band, where it's like, yeah, if I just listened to this and this is the first thing I heard, I would be blown away.
Yeah.
And even if it was new and I came into it and I listened to it, I would be like, oh yeah, the new Rosetta is amazing. When I listen to 6 records in a row, you're like, yeah, it's still amazing. Is it better than the last thing I heard? Because I listened to the combined version of the Galilean Sea so much, or Galilean Satellite so much, like that record sounds bigger to me and more epic than this one. I think this one is a little more restrained. Lyrically, not about space, social commentary about how poor parenting ruins kids' lives.
Yeah, at some point he's like, I feel like everybody should own a dog for at least 3 years prior to having children, which, I mean, there's really not a whole lot of arguing with that. And yeah, so that, I thought that was kind of an interesting concept too, that you'd come from like, yeah, these are songs about a spaceman, to kind of going into something a little bit more, without trying to sound like a dork, but like something a little bit more important, or something that was very, that I feel like a lot more people would probably find more interesting, and something that they would kind of dig into a little bit more. And with this album, they did also release a companion piece to it, which is the Cleansing Undertones of Wake Lift. But like Bryan said earlier, this is not meant to be consumed with Wake Lift. There's a couple of things on it that are that are actually used in Wake Lift, but there's not like, again, it's not like one speaker, two CD players, or mixing in of an MP3 or anything like that. And you would think that something like this would just be like kind of, in addition to, but I mean, this thing's like 4 tracks, so it's 41 fucking minutes. Honestly, I didn't really find the companion EP to be that enjoyable on its own. I thought it was just a little bit too disconnected from the record itself.
Yep.
Exactly.
Correct. Exactly. Perfect. I mean, they intentionally made it so like if you played it together, the record would sound awful.
Yeah. Way to be dicks.
Phenomenal.
There must be something really simple that I'm missing as far as how the records are constructed and released. It's almost like we're back in the 60s, 70s, where you book that hour of studio time and you have 4 or 5 really solid concepts, but then the actual execution is, well, how is the band going to play? Are we going to jam on this for 10 minutes and everybody's going to trade solos? But with this band, it's not like they're doing that. It sounds like they're just trying to create a soundscape, but then you release a companion to that doesn't fit with the overall product. So this is the leftovers, basically. That, to me, is the only visible reason that the band is not more popular, because all of their albums are arguably not good because some of them are the leftovers.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even that they're like necessarily like songs either, you know? It's just a lot of ideas, but I do think it's interesting because like as a fan, I mean, I think the most enjoyable thing, even though I didn't really like the songs, I didn't like the tracks themselves that much. It was fun to kind of listen to it and kind of pick out the elements that did get used for the album. As a fan, I just kind of really enjoy that kind of stuff. So, I mean, in that regard, it's cool. I mean, even though it really just boiled down to like maybe a few samples that were the same, but yeah, I mean, it was cool for what it is. I just thought it deserved at least a little bit of a mention there.
Do you think this is more of a Liquid Tension experiment where the band played for 2 hours and then cut out the good parts and that was the record?
I mean, I've never listened to that band, so I don't know, but I don't know. Like I don't necessarily think that Rosetta is a jam band like you're saying. I do think that these songs are very carefully crafted, and I think that they definitely go for a very specific vibe. And the vibe for me continues very, very well into the next record.
2010, A Determinism of Morality.
Now this was the first Rosetta that I ever heard. And it could not have been a better introduction because I feel like, I mean, this is probably my favorite album by the band overall. Just because I feel like the last one was like a little bit more post-rock, a little bit less hardcore. And since I'm a meathead, this one was a little bit more hardcore, or at least a little bit more post-hardcore or whatever. It's just heavier, and so obviously I'm always going to gravitate towards that a little bit, but I don't know. I really, really, really liked this one just because it was probably one of the first records that they put out that I felt like you could sway a metalhead into this kind of music with this record.
You don't think you could have done that on their debut?
Yeah, I do. Dude, they all okay. Can I just be real for a second? All their records sound the fucking same, and I love it. Right? Can we just get that out of the way right now? Like, I'm trying to find like
how long have you been holding that back?
I'm trying to find like something really, really, really cool to say about it, but there's really not a lot of cool things to say about it. Like, it is what it is. Like, this band, if you liked their first fucking record, you're gonna like all of their fucking records. If you hate their records, you're gonna have a bad time. You know, Rosetta's a hard band to talk about because, like, you know, when it's a shitty band, you have all this material where you can just like shit all over the band, right? Or be like, oh God, why did they do this? I'm looking at you, new 6 Feet Under. You know, like, why would somebody do something like that? Like, why? But with Rosetta, it's like, these guys consistently give me the fucking drug that I want every single time. So yeah, absolutely. The last 2 records, you could totally turn a metalhead with it because there's enough metal, there's enough hardcore in there for people to enjoy. If you like slow ambient, like heavy music, or like post rock or post metal or post office, like whatever, like it's fucking Rosetta, and it's great. So yes, this one another 10 out of 10 would buy again if I had the chance.
I mean, there's a swing on this record for sure. I think there's more in the way of ambient guitar. There's more. You hate to say there's more space, like openness on this record, because like that's what they did for 2 albums. But like over time, their sound slowly morphs, and there's more of the post rock vibe. There's more of the guitar standing out over time, and I think this record dips into that for sure. And again, it's one of those where I'm like, this record is so good, but I don't think it's as good as the first record, but it's still amazing.
Yeah. That's the whole thing. Is it's the classic fanboy argument of their worst record is better than your favorite band's best record. And
I really don't want to call it post rock, but this is the record where it's kind of hard not to say that.
Yeah, and they dive into that more, especially later in their discographies. There's some guitar tonage change, especially going forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I do feel like this is the one where, I guess what I like about this record that gives it kind of the edge for me is that it's a little bit more brief. It's a little bit more to the point than the previous two releases, because you've got an hour investment depending on how you choose to listen to the records. You've got an hour investment on each one of those, whereas this one you're clocking in a little bit over 45 minutes, and the songs are shorter. And I think that's where I get that they're punchier and a little bit more immediate. And I kind of enjoy that, because as much as I love post rock and post metal and all that shit, I do kind of like to be able to listen to one or two songs on my way to wherever, whenever I'm in the car. And so I feel like I can knock out a significant portion of this record in one drive, which is, not like a valid reason to like or dislike a record, but I do feel like that's why I find myself listening to this one more than I maybe listen to the others.
You definitely have to make strategic choices when you're selecting what record you're going to listen to, depending on how long your drive is going to be and how long the activity is going to be that you're about to partake in.
Yeah, I mean, what the hell between The Buried and Me? What the fuck with those 14-minute songs?
You got to swim to the moon sometimes, dude.
I'm good. This band takes me to the moon and beyond, so it's fine.
Is it time for the anesthetic?
Yeah.
2013.
This record's darker. I mean, first impression, this is a darker record than we've gotten from Rosetta before.
Yeah, I wrote out of my notes, we've gotten moody here. Not that there wasn't a mood before, but yeah, this is much darker, and this was actually one of the this was a self-released Bandcamp. This is when the band went full Bandcamp mode, and it was just yep, we're here. The people that like us, that already like us, we're good. I don't really know what the story is behind why they're self-released, but I have a feeling that they're the kind of band that maybe labels just didn't like spending money on. I'm not entirely sure.
It definitely sounds self-released. Not a bad thing in 2013, but it's a significant jump from the previous releases to maybe we didn't have a mastering engineer on this one. I don't know the answer, but the record is definitely darker sounding, if only because it doesn't have as many of the effect layers going on.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's a scaled back. It's not less ambient. But yeah, the noise factor, the extra sounds, bleeps and bloops you get are not there on this record. It's almost like, for a band that does whatever they want anyways, they could really, really taking more chances on this record. We talk about every record sounds the same. I think this record actually stands out in their discography as being significantly different.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's definitely a more straightforward. I don't want to say straightforward's not really the right word, but you guys already said it. There's no reason for me to just parrot exactly what you said, but it's what you guys said. I agree.
It's 2013. We're independent now, and this is our new record. Like you said, if the fans are already there, they're going to buy the record and they're going to be happy with it.
I mean, I think so. I mean, unless you're a huge fan of, unless you're just a huge fan of how big some of those earlier records sounded, this is not a big sounding record. This is actually like the way it's approached in my mind sounds like this should have been their first record and they should have built their way up to Galilean Satellites.
You beat me to that point, because once I listened to this record, I actually went back and started over. And then I started to question why the fourth record sounded more like a starting point than the first record. Then I noticed the self-released portion and I put all of it together. It's just interesting to me that you can break up this discography more than you can with other bands. And even if you listen to the records in a different order, you can still have an overall good experience. I think this is the start of, this is not my favorite record by Rosetta, but I appreciate it because it sounds like a good starting point.
Yeah, totally. It's not my favorite, but I actually really, I found myself coming back to this one a couple of times. This is one of the records that I actually got kind of stuck on for a little while because I was trying to put my finger on exactly why it made me feel different. I'm like, truth be told, I'm not like that analytical, and sometimes I have to listen to things several times before I can really get a good handle on it. But like, because I didn't really notice like the production or anything, I could just see that the songs were a little bit more straightforward, a little bit darker, a little bit moodier. Like I said, I mean, unfortunately in my notes, literally all I wrote was moody. So that's not a lot to go off of, I know, but yeah, I think if you're a fan of the previous records, you're gonna like this one. But there is kind of a little bit more of a turn, and it sounds a little bit more like dudes just jamming in a basement than it sounds like this gigantic like production. And I think that's cool. I think they need that when everything else has been really, really huge sounding.
Yeah, it's just where we dip into EPs.
Yeah, Flies to Flame.
Yeah, because this, like, you come out of something so moody, something so dark and kind of stripped down, and go to Flies to Flame, which really steers hard into like this relaxation, ambient post-rock vibe. Like, they really scaled it back. Like, it is the opposite end of the spectrum, and it is where the band goes moving forward. It is, you might think, oh, these were throwaways that didn't make the last record, but this EP was released on Translation Loss. And so it's not self-released, and it's like, this is where the band is going. These aren't throwaway tracks. This is the new direction.
Yeah, we're at a point now where we're not necessarily, I would say the hardcore elements are more or less stripped away here. And
yeah.
And I'm fine
Completely.
with that because, again, I'm kind of getting to the point now where if I need to, because this is what I listen to modern day Rosetta for, is having the will to be able to concentrate and listen to these songs, and not even as background noise, but for whatever reason they kind of stimulate my brain in a way or kind of slow it down a little bit, and I am able to be more analytical or kind of, I don't know, it's easier to categorize my thoughts. I felt that way when I was listening to this EP because I was just like, man, this is chill, but it's kind of interesting in that, like, because I listen to like a lot of like I'm a big fan of a band called the Mercury Program, and that's the kind of like post-rock stuff that I really like listening to, and it's all instrumental, and you know, and I'm not saying that they sound like that band, but I enjoy that type of post-rock that's not just there to put you to sleep, and it's not even like particularly like slow or dragging on or anything, but I don't know, it keeps my mind occupied in a way that really no other genre of music does. And so it was kind of refreshing to hear Rosetta kind of go into this type of direction, where I could pay attention without having to like actively pay attention, if that makes sense.
Dude, it sounds like you've been watching Toby Wright talk about tomes, because that's almost his pitch video verbatim.
Well, what I'm getting at is that like a lot of these bands that have super dense sounds and really long records, I have to sit there and kind of like stare at some lyrics. That's part of the reason why I'm so big on lyrics, is lyrics force me to pay attention to what I'm listening to. But in this case, the music is just interesting enough on its own to where I don't have to like keep my eye focused on the ball to know what's going on.
And that is why I like EPs. If you're going to transition or change your style just a little bit, the EP makes sense because you're telling the listener what you're thinking about doing, or you're letting the listener be a part of that transition versus releasing an entire record that has what seems like leftovers that may or may not fit. For fans of Rosetta, you're in on the band. If you're still here on the self-released, now you're paying attention that the band is actually progressing in that self-released mentality versus we made a bunch of stuff and here it all is at once. Put it together or don't, depending on what year it is.
So this next release gets really interesting. So somebody makes a documentary about your band. A guy named Justin Jackson did a documentary film on Rosetta called Audio Visual, and who better to do the soundtrack for that documentary than Rosetta? And I didn't actually, I wasn't even going to really talk about this on the discussion, but I just thought that was really interesting, that they would do soundtracks. And then I started thinking about like what other movies it would be really cool to hear Rosetta do the soundtrack of, you know. And I don't know. I thought this was cool. It's definitely a little bit more low key, but I just felt like it was worth mentioning because I don't know a whole lot of bands that do that. I mean, certainly people play clips from bands when they're doing band documentaries, but this was kind of like an original score composed by the band for their own documentary, which was kind of neat.
God, no, super chill, super ambient, super laid back. I mean, it's a film score, and it's different, but it's beautiful.
The only band I can think of is Queen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other bands that frequently make film scores?
I think, okay, this is a weird one. I'll throw it out here, but Demon Hunter kind of did something like that with their 45 Days documentary. They wrote a whole bunch of like instrumental songs for that. I kind of thought it was all hot garbage, but they did do it. So there you go.
It was not good.
It was not great.
2015, Quintessential Ephemera.
Oh yeah. This is the good shit right here, Joe.
This intro goes on forever, and I like it. I don't listen to stuff like this because I'm trying to get punched in the face by intensity. I listen to this when I've had enough of everything else, and this is a step up from the previous record and the previous EP. And the EP makes sense in the context of this record because it tells me where the band was going. And then we got there.
They add a guitar player. They add clean vocals. I mean that intro. Yeah, you're floating in water. You're floating in space. Like they really steer away from the metal side of their sound on this record, and it's definitely a fresh sound for Rosetta. They couldn't name their songs on this album, so that's annoying.
Yeah, a little bit.
Like super melodic. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, very, very melodic, very chill. Like I said, this is kind of another kind of it's not really a get shit done record because I don't really like to do a lot when I listen to Rosetta. I like to just kind of chill. I kind of wish that I still smoked pot. I feel like it'd be more enjoyable if I still did when listening to this band. But I do think that like they are they've really come into their own as far as like kind of realizing where the trail from where they started kind of leads. I feel like they do follow a similar arc of other bands kind of in this style where, you know, you kind of start off as one thing and you have this huge vision, and for years and years and years, you never want to detract from that vision and you want to find ways to make it better. And they kind of went through all of that. They went through that whole arc of like, we're trying to create this huge vision. And then I think after a while, they reached a point where they're like, okay, well, what else can we do with our sound? Keep it still like us, have our own like unique, our own unique touch. And I feel like these records do that. Like, cause even though they're softer and there's clean vocals, like, you know, at all. And the songs are slower paced. They're more chill. They're more relaxed. But there's still no question as to whether you're listening to Rosetta. They still maintain their identity through the stylistic change. And I think a lot of bands are not able to really hold on to that. They're not able to do that. But Rosetta has on their side that they were fucking awesome and atmospheric from the get-go. So it's not like they have to like figure out a way to like re-perfect that. And honestly, I'm probably making it a lot more complicated than it really was for the band. I have a feeling that they literally just all showed up and were like, okay, yeah, I kind of just want to do this now. Let's see if this vibes really well. And it did. And it was great. I paid for the record on Bandcamp. Not going to say how much I paid. I'm a heartless bastard when it comes to pay what you want. But here's my 2 cents. I think it has to be at least $1.
Is it time for Utopioid?
Well, I do want to take a quick pit stop to a Dead Enders reunion, which was their compilation record. And this is like remixes, reduxes of like not all of, but like a whole bunch of their songs. And I don't know, I kind of like hearing different versions. Like I said, I'm kind of a nerd like that. And it was kind of cool after all this like really chill, like more ambient stuff to kind of get different interpretations of some of the older Rosetta songs. I thought that was kind of a welcome thing. And this record also has like, how many records have you ever listened to that has like 10 songs on a record? It's a compilation, it's great or whatever. But then there's 12 bonus tracks. Like at what point do the bonus tracks kind of take over? But the bonus tracks are like, there's a lot of live versions of songs and demo versions, which I'm a huge fucking nerd. I love listening to demo versions of songs that I already know just to see what the differences are.
And that's fun for fans because you're looking for something significantly different that makes you enjoy the song more than what you already did. Very rarely do you actually get that alternate version, that alternate take that is anything other than this is the take they didn't use. So it's interesting because how else do they want me to hear this song?
This was my introduction to the band, and I mean, it got me hooked. The demo versions of early songs, like I was like, okay, this is cool. Like I dig this band. Let's see what else they got, and then I get blown away. So even if that is your introduction point, there's enough cool stuff happening to get you hooked on this band, or for me, anyways. But I am also a music nerd, so that's why I'm here.
I think we can all relate to that to a certain degree. All right, so we've got another record here.
2017, Utopioid.
Utopioid.
I like the word. It sounds like the Changeling. I dig it.
This was a pretty interesting release. They are still very much sailing into their more can take a drink every time we say the word atmospheric territory, where they are still kind of I don't know. The music's almost starting to become so ambient that like I felt like on this one I had a little bit more trouble paying attention.
At what point did they pass Hope's Fall on their way to the outskirts of the universe where it's nothing but ambience?
Probably within the first 3 seconds of their first album, I would imagine.
Yeah.
If I had to guess.
Space bands. Yeah, I mean, I think this record is just the next evolution of what they were doing on the previous record. It's a little darker. I think it's a bigger sounding record. I mean, Neophyte Visionary is like such a killer track.
Oh yeah.
I mean, what else is there to say? The band keeps releasing massive records with complicated song titles and complicated album titles and 13-minute songs. And they're all good.
Yeah. It's weird. Like there's literally no fuck ups like that I'm aware of. I'm sure if you ask the band members, they could tell you literally everywhere that they fucked up. But I think that like overall, yeah, it's just the next record by Rosetta and it's great. You're going to love it if you liked, at the very least, if you liked the last two, you're going to really love this one. I could see maybe some people being a little bit more like heavy. But I think it's. Well,
you wait because the heavy's coming.
What's that?
I said the heavy's coming, so just wait.
Okay, gonna keep waiting. So normally this would be like the end of the episode, right?
This is the last record.
Yeah. Well, it's not the last release though.
How many exceptions are you making today?
Well, that's the thing about this band is like it's complicated. They have 2 more releases, and that would be Sower of Wind and Terra Sola. So, I mean, which one of those fine ones do we want to dig into first?
Sower of the Wind is it's just ambient. It's more companion music.
Yeah.
It's low key. It's chill. It's you hate to say background music, but that's what it is. It's not as commanding of your attention as their other releases.
Yeah.
Terra Sola, their most recent release, the title track, 11 and a half minutes of just bone crushing heaviness. I think it's the heaviest track they've done in a decade.
Yeah, I feel like they kind of had this feeling that they were going. I feel like this feeling that they were like, okay, the last 3 albums have all been the intro for this for this bone crusher. And I was actually really, really surprised because whenever I got to this record, I was like, there's no way in hell this is the latest release. Like, this must be something that they took, this must be something that they took from earlier in the catalog and just released it in 2019. I really, cause I hadn't been following the band for a number of years because of meathead reasons. And, I just found that they were just, I was so patient and I was so positive, and then like after all this time, they just gave me what I wanted, and I think it's awesome. But like at the same time, even though this is like super heavy,
the last 2 tracks are not
right. They go back to kind of where they were, and it's Rosetta doing the Rosetta thing because they've learned kind of they perfected the atmospheric part of it. I think they always had kind of the heavy side of it down as far as what they wanted to do with that. So you're getting that atmosphere again. You're getting kind of those more chill tracks, but I don't know, like it contrasts so well with the heavy on this one that I just think that they I don't know, they 100% nailed it. Like, do you like Rosetta? Then you're gonna like this record.
Yep.
Joe's like, fuck you guys. I didn't listen to those. I didn't know we were going to talk about 12 additional releases to the originals.
If I heard them, they came up on shuffle and I wasn't paying attention, because that's kind of what you get to do when you're listening to Rosetta.
Yeah, I mean, that is one way to do it. Well, it's funny too, because like Joe and I, like full disclosure, Joe and I were going to do this episode like a week ago, and I was like, I don't know. I feel like we might need to hold off because there's a lot more to this than meets the eye.
Hey, dude, I know this guy named Bryan Patton. He's way into Rosetta.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
You might have heard of him. He's the host of the As the Story Grows podcast.
Yeah. I've talked to him a couple of times.
Yeah.
But I think that the thing is that like this band, like overall, how many bands do you know that like just always did the thing that you like, kind of the whole time?
Not very many. And even the ones that my brain tells me do the thing that I like all the time have a few missteps along the way.
Yeah, and Rosetta does not.
They really don't. Like,
it definitely consistently delivers that ambient shoegazing. I'm so happy Bryan was on the show today, because now I have a definition for shoegazing. And even though they changed along the way, they're still delivering that same concept that you've been listening to for the past 15 years.
Did we do final thoughts? I think we just did final thoughts.
I think everybody just snuck in a final thought there.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta. If you're Joe disagrees, but my final thought was you gotta commit when you're listening to Rosetta. Like the albums are so massive, and they're meant to be experienced and listened to as a whole, in my opinion. And it's just a band you gotta sit with and stick with, and every record is amazing.
I believe you're correct. The music as a whole is released as a single record because it's meant to be consumed as a single record. I definitely do not disagree. But with my limited exposure to the band, it's interesting how well it all plays together. So even if you were to combine it, it's still going to play nice. And that itself is even rare.
Fair.
I agree with you fellas. I think this band is incredible, and they're one of my biggest secrets as far as like the types of bands that like I listen to on the regular. I think it's really hard because like, you know, we do this metal show and we talk about like metalcore and hardcore and like all that shit all the time. And I love all that shit. I really, really, really do. But most of the time I spend my days listening to shit like Rosetta and, like I said, like the Mercury program, shit like Dead Can Dance. Like I like this just atmospheric shit that's just very, very different. And I don't know, Broken Social Scene. That's a good one. I just like that sort of like post-rocky stuff. And I think that's why it's so hard to talk about Rosetta, because Rosetta's less of a band to me and more of just like a feeling. So this was a hard episode to get through, because it was like I don't get to say all the shit that I normally get to say about how like, well, this one dropped this element and this one was more of this and this was heavier, this one was more commercial. They obviously sold the fuck out right here. You know, like none of that stuff applies to Rosetta. It's like a totally, totally different thing. Almost like they're on a different planet. And that's the last space pun that I'll make. But yeah, if you haven't checked this band out, check them out. They're awesome. They're going to make you feel good, and you're going to love it.
Sounds to me like everybody gave their final thoughts on Rosetta. So I'm going to release my version of an EP and say, Bryan Patton, what's your album of the week?
My album of the week is Orange Mathematics by Frontier. If you like Dillinger Escape Plan but wish they didn't play any jazz or have any math elements in their music, then this band is for you.
Dan, what about you?
Well, I mean, despite all of the issues that have taken place with this band and this week, it's got to be Blood and Fire by Zao. And then whenever I get my Splinter Shards next week, it'll be Splinter Shards by Zao. Blood and Fire is awesome. You should definitely check out that awesome build up on March. The build up never ends. It will stay with you forever. And I was actually, so I had a crazy idea where I was like, I'm going to get a fucking magnifying glass and I'm going to find that specific groove that goes all the way around the record. And I'm just going to like take an X-Acto knife and I'm just like pop like a little itty tiny little piece out of it. And like the record will still absolutely skip. Like I will hear it, but I won't have to get up to make the rest of the record play. So that's my going strategy right now. I have no idea how the boys are going to what will end up being done about this, if anything at all. Hopefully something will be done, but we say all of this in jest. We're not making fun of the band. It's just one of those things where, like, when they first started, the band was surrounded by drama, and now now they don't have interpersonal drama, but drama just keeps like creating itself over and over and over again. So
can't escape it.
They cannot escape it. It's just drama is a member of the band, the most consistent member, the only original member of the band. So yeah, so that's a long, convoluted album of the week, but this is where we're at.
I took a few musical detours this week, and one of them was Frank Zappa, the best band you never heard in your life, mostly live with a couple studio tracks. And if you want to hear a band that has been rehearsed to death and can play the most random, out-of-control shit, and it all sounds good, that is a record that should not be skipped by anyone. Take us out, DFT.
If you've ever been listening to this podcast and wanted us to talk about a different band than the one we talked about tonight, well, stay tuned. We talk about a different band every week. But if you'd like to be more involved in the process of what bands get picked, you can always reach out to us at facebook.com/discography discussion. You can tweet at us at discussmetal. You can send us an email at danandjoeshow@gmail.com. You can join us on our Discord server. There's a link in the show notes that'll take you right to Discord. And you can always check out our Teespring store, where we have lots and lots and lots of sweet merch. Every Monday and Thursday night at 10:30 Central, I am on Twitch streaming video games. At least I will be whenever my computer is fixed, so stay tuned for that. Twitch.tv/discussmetaldan.
And on that note, this has been episode 191 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion. And please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks. Bryan, Patton, and As the Story Grows can be found at asthestorygrows.com and on all your social media platforms.
Right now.